Welcome to part 2 of making a clay artifact. This week we are going to be painting our clay that symbolizes our person in history. We'll need your paints and paintbrush, a piece of paper of any color, a marker, glue if any parts of yours fell off, and your clay. You could use any type of paint that you prefer. If you prefer liquid paint, I would suggest putting it out on a plate. And if you're using watercolor paint, you'll need a little bit of water in a cup. I used the watercolor paint that came with the art kit and it turned out pretty well. If you want the colors to be dark, you will have to go over with a few layers of color. So since I was doing the American flag, I started first with the red stripes. And since I didn't have any white paint, I just left the area of the clay, the natural color of it, for the white stripes. Notice how I do want to paint the sides of the clay that are showing too. So you don't have to paint the bottom part of your clay that sits on the desktop that you're painting on, but the other 3 sides of your clay figure you will want to paint, any part that you could see. The red paint was very light and looked like pink, so I went over it at least 2 to 3 times with the red paint to make it dark. And I did not want to use a lot of water. You only want to use a couple drops of water, and then you want to make a nice thick paint out of it if you want the color to be dark. When I want to use a new color, I wash it off in the water first, and then I made a few circles in the blue paint to really make a thick blue paint into like a paste. And then I use that to cover in the top left rectangle. And notice I do want to go on the side of the clay figure as well. And I painted that blue too. After I was done with one layer of paint, I would let it dry for a couple of minutes, and then I would add the next layer of paint over the top if it didn't look dark enough to me. Now remember, watercolor paints are meant to be light in color. It's never going to get quite dark as liquid paint. But I like the way that mine dried in the end, and I did about 2 coats of each color. And a coat means 1 layer or 1 time over. So I did that twice to get the color depth that I got there. The black was hard to get a deep black, so it does turn out to be more like a gray, which was perfect for the flagpole that I was trying to make. There's how it looked after 2 coats, so I decided to add 1 more coat, and after the 3rd coat, I thought it was dark enough for the true colors of the American flag. If you made yours into a plate or a bowl, think about things that are symbolic or stand for the person that you have been studying. If you can do a symbol, a peace sign, a heart, other symbols of countries or beliefs that you could paint on it. You could even paint a portrait of your person, or even paint a picture of where they live as a landscape to stand for that person that you have been studying. There are no rules for this project, so as long as you are making something that goes with the person that you have been studying, you be creative with your clay artifact in this project. Next, choose a piece of paper that you want to be the background behind your clay artifact for the picture. It could be white like I chose, or it could be any color that you have at your house. You're going to let your clay artifact dry. After the paint is dry, you're going to place it onto your paper background and write your name. You could also write the year or even a message about your clay artifact if you want to write something about it as the artist. If your clay artifact needs any glue, now is a good time to glue on any pieces that have fallen off after the paint is all dry. You could use this Elmer's glue, or you could use, if your parents allow you to use stronger glue, with an adult's help. I did have the legs and tail of my turtle fall off, so I did have to glue it back on, but I was able to lay it in a way that I was able to stick it on with just Elmer's glue. So as you can see in the video, I started with a light green color on my sea turtle's back. I wanted it to look like a sea turtle, so I liked how the color came out light, and I only did about 2 layers of this light green. Notice that I used 2 different sizes of paintbrushes. One, I'm using the bigger paintbrush to cover the bigger areas like the sea turtle's back, and then a smaller paintbrush to paint on some smaller details later. Next, I used a brown color for the sea turtle's legs that had fallen off and his head. I am going to paint those first, and then I will add the glue later. For my second coat, I used a yellow color over the top of the green, and I also mixed in a little more green to make a yellow green, and I like how the light mix turned out once it dried. So I let that yellow-green layer of paint dry for a few minutes, and then I used my smaller paintbrush to paint on the brown lines as the details onto the turtle's back. I painted both hexagons and quadrilaterals, looking at a picture of a sea turtle's shell on its back. I did have to add 2 layers of brown paint over this design on the back for it to show up as dark as I wanted it to. Once the paint was dry, and it only took a few minutes because the layers were not thick, then I put it onto the background paper that I picked out for it. This time I picked out green paper, and I did have to glue on the legs and tail again, so I added a little bit of glue on each part, and then I placed them together to dry on top of my green background paper. Finally, write your name as the artist's name. You could also write the date, the year, or add a message about your clay artifact or about your historical figure. For this project, you are required. That means you must post a picture onto your Art Seesaw class. Thank you. I can't wait to see them.